Tanchi Well, hello, how are you? Well, welcome to Homelands, originally broadcast on CFCR Community Radio 90.5 FM in Saskatoon, Homelands, the Métis and Treaty 6 territories, CFCR.ca. This is your favorite auntie, Andrea Letting Dishni Kashun. Call me Auntie Andy if you like, and I'll be your host today. I'm part settler, part relative, and 100% ally to everyone. I'm just me, not a card-carrying member of any Indigenous nation, but I'm loved, adopted by, and related to many, rejected by a few, haters gonna hate, relators gonna relate. I have Indigenous family relations and may secretly love them a little bit more than all the rest, but only because they are the first peoples of this land who welcomed all the guests. I am mostly Irish and a little Scandinavian with a serving of mystery, and that's the way I was raised, strongly decolonial with a strong sense of justice and a big related heart for all. I mostly relate to my Batosh Métis friends and family and culture, and have continued to try and live that beautiful good life that Mio permits one. So, from the fringes of the sash, I situate myself as relative and ally and welcome you, my listeners, as brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, cousins, relatives in the homelands. And welcome my relative today, Melissa Powless Day. I'll just read you a brief bio about Melissa before we get started, but she is an Anishinaabe and Kenian from the territory. Sorry, I butchered that. I'll have to get her to say it correctly. Walpole Island First Nation, with family ties in Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. Her poetry has appeared in the Turns Review, TNQ, Windsor Review, Luna Station Quarterly, and Yellow Medicine Review. And her first chapbook, Secondhand Moccasins, was published in 2023 by Ann Strother Press and then shortlisted for the BP Nicol Chapbook Award. Melissa is also a scholar and educator who is currently pursuing a PhD in Indigenous education at Western University. She serves as the chair for Western's Indigenous Writers Circle and as a visiting cultural teacher for the London District Catholic School Board. Welcome, Melissa. Tawau. Thank you so
Miigwech,
much.
nawa. So bonjour ani most indigenous cause mang in the dodam dash kenzi bin minwa bekajan on the jundaba nishnabe kwe minwa ganigahaga endao. Um, Thanks so much for having me, Andrea. This is awesome. Looking forward to chatting and sharing a bit about my poetry. I'm definitely new to the whole interview circuit, and so as you're reading the bio, and we had an exchange before, like, oh, anything to update on the bio, and I was like, yeah, no, it's good. And I realized that the one thing that I forgot to update in the bio is the fact that my book has just come out, which you can't see because it's blurred. But yeah, so I just published a bow forged from ash, which is from Palimpsest Press. And I'm kind of on the promo circuit to get the word out about this new book of poetry.
Exciting, exciting. So, when did you first identify as a poet? Was it when you were a teenager or a kid, or did you come to it as an adult? Like, tell us a little bit about your journey as a writer.
Yeah, that's a good question. So my mom was super supportive of just about anything I wanted to do. Like if I had passion for it, she was like, "Go, let's do it. Let's find out a way to support you in that." And so very early on, she gave me a notebook, and I was going through a rough patch in elementary school, and she said, just use this notebook, um, put your ideas, put your thoughts, whatever you got to get out of your body, just put it into this notebook. Um, and I guess that's kind of where I started with poetry. But in terms of sort of understanding myself as a poet, really it wasn't until maybe just a couple of years ago. I write fiction and poetry and on all kinds of things. And so I've always written poems and shared poems with friends and had the luck and the privilege to have a few published here and there. But if you had asked me like, oh, like, do you see yourself as a poet or, what kind of poet are you? I don't think I would be able to answer that. Um, and it wasn't really until my first collection came out, which is the chapbook, Secondhand Moccasins, um, where that kind of changed for me. And maybe it was just having something physical in my hands that I could share with people. Um, but I think it was also the community recognition. So in London, where I'm from, Deshkanzibe, there's a great literary community that I'm very fortunate and very proud and happy to be a part of. And just seeing the support and the love when I was launching the chapbook, um, that really kind of filled my heart. And I kind of came to a point where I was like, yeah, I am a poet. I have poems to share. So yeah, bit of a long story, but that's kind of how it goes.
I love hearing that. I love that. I love that journey. Did you want to share anything from Secondhand Moccasins, or did you want to kind of focus on your new book?
So the great thing about a bow forged from ash, for anybody who might be interested, it's kind of a deal because we've incorporated all the poems from the chapbook into the first section. So that was on advice of my editor, who is a very knowledgeable literary type person, and so they are in here as well.
Fantastic. Did you want to share any poems from that first part of your new collections?
Sure. All right, let me just get the page here. So Secondhand Moccasins was really about sort of a love letter, a thank you letter to my mom, who was again a huge force in my life. But also she gave me so many things that I didn't know that she had given me until I was much older. Part of that being having just pride in being an Indigenous woman. So the first part of the book and the chapbook is very much sort of, like I said, a letter to her, a thank you for all of the gifts that she gave me. So I'll start with this one. It's in the first section of the new book, and it's called Blood Memory. A people cut, bleed, not feathers and beads or stoic glances, but generations. Deep arterial spray, thick with stolen babies and miseducation. When Nokmis says Nanda Mkwan, wanting sugar for her tea, those words are bandages, staving off lingual exsanguination. My daughter will pack the wound. I pack the wound. My mother packs the wound. Nokmis grins that knowing grin. Our pack work is a patchwork, a quilt, stitching together evidence, resistance, with thick threads of resilience. Boujou and fry bread, big drum singers and Elijah Harper, Cindy Blackstock and those Bear Clan patrollers. We have 30,000 years of blood in our veins, you know. When I venture out into the cold, I wrap our quilt around my shoulders and slip on my mother's moccasins to walk, as we have always done, in the footsteps of those who came before and those who have yet to come. Gotcha.
Beautiful. And that's kind of the notion of secondhand moccasins a little bit, I guess. Hey, I
Absolutely, yeah.
I love that. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. So, when you write your poetry, does it just kind of come to you, or do you have a like a practice that you sit down every morning and like what kind of writer are you? What's your practice?
Yeah,
Um,
I would love to tell you that I'm a very disciplined writer with a very clockwork-like routine. But it's very, I wouldn't say it's sporadic, but it's organic. Most of my poems, they find their beginnings in either an experience or a memory or a conversation. And sometimes, like immediately, I can kind of see like, oh, this is something I want to make into a poem. But other times it might be like an image or, a line somebody says, and it kind of sticks with me. And I'm like, okay, I have to explore this. I want to kind of expand on this and put something down on the page. Um, so I'd say for this book, there was a bit more intentionality around it. This is my first full collection I put together, so that was a learning experience. And so there were a few times where I was like, okay, like, I do want to include a poem about this in the collection. So I'm going to sit down, I'm going to think about that. But for the most part, they're very sort of responsive to just things that are going on in my life.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very, very beautiful. So when you find time to do it, does it just kind of pour out, or is there lots of editing? Or I know myself when I write a poem, I get a lot of like what is called onboarding and off-ramping, where I like write too much at the beginning and I write too much at the end, and I kind of have to take the bookends off and get to the core in the middle. But that's kind of one of my little habits. Like what is your process like, or how does it come about?
Yeah, I would say like sometimes you get those, those lightning strikes and it just comes onto the page and it's fairly, I won't say perfect, but it's fairly complete. I do have those. I would say a lot of it comes from sort of building around either an image or an emotion that I really want to convey. Um, my editor, Jim Johnston, who is a wonderful editor. I'm also an academic, and so sometimes he reminds me like, "Oh, you're being a little too academic here. Like, let's put this back into the poetry." So that's always a really good reminder. Um, and I think for both my poetry and my fiction process, one thing that I've found really helpful is that I try not to get bogged down in the details as I'm writing it. So I might come up with a line, and that line is a little bit cliche or it's a little bit kind of, on the nose. But in that moment, if I kind of just want to keep going, I'll just like, all right, this is here. It needs to get fixed. It needs to be a bit more playful, but I'm going to put something on the page and kind of just keep going, and then come back during the editing process to, make it a bit more punchy or a bit more um, less expected, I guess is the best way of putting it.
That's a great way of putting it. It's kind of like I don't know what it's like carving a statue. I guess writing poetry is like writing poetry. It's hard to put into, a metaphor. But yeah, it's a process, and it's always interesting to hear how other people do it. So yeah, what advice would you have for other writers out there, people who are thinking about dabbling in poetry, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, I'm gonna say the first thing that comes to mind, and this is probably something that everybody says, so I don't want it to come off as like a cop out, but really just write. Um, just write and try not to, it's hard. I'm not gonna say it's easy all the time, but try not to let yourself be stopped by doubts or by comparisons or by some other kind of expectation that you have around what writing should be or what, a poet should be. Just write. And some of them, they might not be great, and that's okay because we don't have to have perfect ones 100% of the time. We just need to have good ones and ones that are coming from the heart and, speaking truth in ways that is going to connect with other people. Um, I recently had a kind of a friend. Um, she was asking me about the writing process, and she's always been interested in writing and she has these ideas, but she's never kind of like fully gone into just kind of sitting down to put some of her ideas onto a page. And we're talking about that. And I think one thing definitely that I carried with me for a long time, thinking about writing is just this idea of whatever you're reading, whether it's a poetry book, it's a novel, like that is the finished product of, whoops, apologies here. Of course, nobody ever texts me until if I'm being recorded. Um, but those books, those novels, those poetry collections, they're finished products that could have taken literally years, could have taken tens of thousands of rounds of editing. But we see those and we think as writers, especially as early writers, like my writing has to be that good out the gate. Um, and so really kind of shedding that expectation and just being okay with, whatever and however you put words onto a page, that's where you have to start.
That's great advice and a really great point too. Yeah, you're right. Like lots of people think that that edited book that they read, that polished prose that they read, or those perfect poems just came out the gate like that. And like that's that once you get to know the writing process, you realize that's, you've got the like what everybody calls the shitty first draft or the vomit draft or whatever, like just that, you get it out of you. And that's what so many, I think, wannabe writers are afraid to do. They say, "Oh, I think I have a book in me. I just have never got around to," and you gotta go through that process and then share it. And then, editing is fun if you if you approach it in the right way and realize that your precious baby is not quite as beautiful as you thought it would, and it will get better with work. And yeah, I think that's really, really great to point out that, nobody publishes that book like on the first draft. They go through so many rounds of edits with so many eyes on it. So yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's great to know. Does that help you? Does your poetry writing help you in your academic? Like, what's the crossover?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot, which is cool. Because I guess like conventional thinking, has this very thick and rigid line between the arts and the more academic or the science, however you want to kind of frame that. For me, the two, like they cohabitate really inside me. There's no separation between the two. So there is poetry in my research, and there's research in my poetry. And that has, I think it's made me a better poet, and it's also made me a better researcher. Um, so I see strength in it, but I also just see like I don't know, like a symbiosis, I guess, of the two.
I love that. I love that quote. There's poetry in my research and research in my poetry. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I was doing a job interview yesterday for a comms position, and they asked me about writing an article, and I said, well, because I'm at my core a poet, I'm always looking for those shortcuts, like those phrases and those images and those pictures that really convey the idea of the whole thing, and then
Mhm.
build a staircase with those shortcuts. And they went, oh, very interesting. So yeah, yeah, there's something about poetry, I think, that just, I mean, great poets have been like copywriters for advertising agencies and, all kinds of things just because they're able to convey ideas in a short amount of space, right? Which is the magic of poetry.
It is, and like when I'm teaching my classes, like that's one thing I'll say all the time. Like I was like, come on, debate me on this. Um, that I think a well-written poem in one page can say more than a dissertation. And it can speak to you in ways that a dissertation cannot. Um, I think poetry, for me, it's art, it's expression, it's truth. And as poets, we kind of use the tools of all those three different realms really to, like I said, connect with the reader, hopefully. For me, that's always the goal is that somebody's going to take up one of my poems and it's going to resonate with them in some way, shape, or form.
I love that. And if you've just joined us, you're on CFCR 90.5 FM in Saskatoon, Homelands of the Métis Treaty 6 territory. And this is Homelands, the program with Melissa Powless Day, who is sharing her poetry with us. And Melissa, would you like to read another piece from your book, your new book?
Absolutely. So I'm going to read this one. It's one of my favorite ones. It's fairly short. It comes from a conversation and really like things that have been taught to me from my uncle and my aunt about the land. Um, oh, sorry, it's escaping me here as I look for it. And I would say one thing, in terms of the research being in the poetry is I didn't expect this, but I'm quite happy that this happened. As I was writing this collection, I really got to learn about the plants and the relatives here in southwestern Ontario, um, and I guess kind of strengthen my relationship with them because I didn't know them as well as I thought I did, and learning a lot more about them even after the fact, it's really sparked an interest. So this is called Tree Museum. There is no grieving process for the tall ones lost to the imposition of strangers remaking their strange lands, silent invasions planted, seeds from across the sea. A cookie cutout displayed, 4 feet wide. My friend puts his hand upon smooth rings. I knew this tree. Ornamentation stifling first beings, while cities raise whole communities. Scots pine was not the remedy, wild parsnip a poison. We need good guests, my uncle reminds me. Lilacs, an allegory for coexisting. We need Gittigan, not subdivisions, seed nurseries to reconcile, artifacts of giants we put on walls. You betcha.
Ah, that's beautiful. Even just the title was so evocative, Tree Museum. It made me think right away of I was in Amsterdam just before COVID, so that would have been yeah, like 5, 6 years ago. And one of the things I went and saw was the Botanical Museum in Amsterdam, and they had redwood, an American redwood that they had taken and planted over there. And I just put my hand on it and I was talking to it, and it had been there for hundreds of years, and it was amazing. And it was just like I felt the homesickness of this tree to be all alone in this botanical museum and the only one of its kind, you know?
Gosh.
So it made me think, Tree Museum right away made me think of that. They have plants from all over the world that because they sailed everywhere, right? And so they brought the plants back to their horticultural museum. But yeah,
Wow.
that's a beautiful poem. Thank you so much. I think we have about 5, 6 minutes left. If you want to share, another piece of work or talk more about your work or
Sure, absolutely.
yeah, yeah. What would you say your collection in general? Is there kind of a theme this collection in particular, or is it kind of eclectic or
Yeah, so this one, for me, and I don't want to necessarily prescribe how people read the poetry because you might get something else out of it, and that's perfectly wonderful. For me, though, this poetry collection is about reclamation. It's about my journey, and not to say that it's anywhere close to done, but my journey of reclaiming my identity as an Indigenous woman. So we had a little conversation about this before it began, for instance. So on the book and in other places, you'll see my name as Melissa Powless Day. My legal name is Melissa Schnarr because my mother was taken in the 60s scoop and she was adopted by a German family. And so part of that reclamation journey has been reclaiming the names I should have had, as well as learning my language. And that has really had a relationship with this reintroducing and relearning about the plants in my territory. Because, there's so many times where I've wanted to write a poem about a particular plant relative or been inspired in some way, shape, or form, and only to find out it's actually not even from here. It was brought over by settlers. Um, and one of the ways that I've learned to kind of judge that is, whether or not we have a language in Anishinaabe for it. And if we don't, it's probably been brought over from somewhere else. So all of that is part of it, as well as reconnecting, remembering, reclaiming my relationship with my territory as well.
profound? We've had a lot of guests that have been 60 Scoop or their parents were 60 Scoop and kind of explored that a lot. I used to be the director of communications for the 60 Scoop Healing Foundation.
Mhm.
When it first started out, I was their inaugural director of communications, and yeah, it's a, an important chapter of history that hasn't ended yet. I mean, the amount of kids that are still in foster care, across the country. I mean, at least they're not sending them out internationally anymore, but it's still a huge issue, and yeah, it's good to know that you're doing the reclamation work. It's important work.
Absolutely. And, just as you say, so people think the 60s scoop, what happened in the 60s, it's over and done with. But we have the millennial scoop now.
Yeah,
52% of kids in care in Canada are Indigenous.
yeah.
And that doesn't get talked enough about because these strategies to sever people from their lands, their families, their languages, their culture, their nations, those are still happening. They're just happening under different banners now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So true. Well, we've got like a couple of minutes left. Did you want to squeeze one last poem in before we go to our break?
Sure. I'll see if I can find a good shortish one.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, and for those of you just joining us, this is CFCR 90.5 FM in Saskatoon, and we're almost at the half-hour break, but we're listening to poet Melissa Powless Day. She's an Anishinaabe and Kanien'kehá:ka from Ontario territories, joining us with sharing some of her poetry.
so this one is called Time Travel, and it's from the first section of the book. These earrings take me back to laughter, warm grass, lake air, skies blue enough to fall into. When the fringe dances in the breeze, I forget to remember you. I expect you in the next room over, drinking coffee, eating saltines with butter. For a breath, you are here again, denim, pony bead fringe clacking as you wrap a dripping 6-year-old in the safety of your worn jean jacket. Gotch.
Oh, very evocative. Kind of a poem of loss and remembering, and yeah, very beautiful. We talked a little bit about process and that kind of thing. Is a lot of it, and you've talked about, of course, your relationship with plants. Is it kind of intertwined with the memories, or like some of it's about the plants, some of it's about memories, some of it's about reclamation? Is that kind of some of the themes I'm seeing, or
Yeah, I think that's a good like way of summarizing. I kind of think about it. People will say like blood memory. I think about it as ancestral memory, but it's more than memory. It's about restoring the relationships that we had before all of this severing happened, and that is to the land, it is to the plant beings, it is to the water, as well as each other and our language. And so I think for me, reclamation is all of those things. And I'm sorry. um, it's all of these things to me, and my poetry is, I guess, the vehicle with which I explore that as best I can, or try to mark my journey in these words.
that's a beautiful way of putting it. Well, that first half hour has flown by very quickly, so we'll go to break and we'll be right back after these commercials. That concludes the first half hour, half of our hour of Homelands this Saturday morning with our guest Melissa Powless Day. So we will be right back on CFCR 90.5 FM with the second half. So don't turn that dial.